sleep, and then I started thinking about things I wanted to do, and I just started seeing this picture of you and me talking about your Notion, and I thought, well, what's that all about? And so here we are.
I am excited. I love my Notion. It is one of I've put probably, if I had to guess, somewhere around 1,000 hours maybe into what you're about ready to see. Not in Notion specifically, but at least 1,000 hours.
I know there's a deep process, and I think probably what inspired this really was when you and I were going through, you were talking to me about your journals, and you were showing me all the journals. I know you've done this publicly as well, all the journals you've kept, and talking about that journaling journey. In fact, honestly, I'm not sure whether we had a private conversation or whether this was um, in your private podcast feed. See, it doesn't matter. It's no different. It's just it really inspired me, made me start thinking. This is what I started thinking about. You write more than most writers I know. I mean, people who are pros who get paid big bucks to write books and copy and magazine articles and whatever, professional writers, but you write more than they do. And I've for a long time said to people, it's easy to know who the writers are. They're the ones who are writing.
You
You
know
write more
that
than I do.
it's crazy that you say that because I mean, I heard you say that this morning when you invited me to this. It's like, this is why I want to invite you, is because you write more than most writers ever consider writing. And I think about, the Hamilton soundtrack from the play. And it's like he writes like he's running out of time or whatever.
Yes.
And the funny thing is I never, it's like, man, I wish I could be such a prolific creator of content. And I'm like, what am I thinking? It's like, well, of course I'm a prolific creator of content. I have 48 podcast shows. I have over 4,700 podcast episodes, and I have notes on everything.
I'm just thinking about the numbers. If you take the average number of words you speak per minute and did the math on how many words those podcasts added up to and just had them transcribed, it would be no doubt millions of words.
Well, that's pretty fun to think about. And the average podcast length, by the way, of those over 4,700 podcast episodes is 1 hour. So
Some may go up to 3 or 4.
there have been a few.
So
You're outing me, Ray.
not only do you write more than most writers write, you write with more intentionality than most writers I know. And I know some really professional writers. I'm talking about New York Times best-selling, recognized authors who are not as intentional as you are about the knowledge you collect, the notes you take, the journal entries you make, and then what you're going to do with them. So many people may keep journals, but they end up just being dusty old books on a shelf that get thrown away after you die. That's not going to be the case with your stuff because I see how intentional you are with it. So
Well, it could be that the journals get dusty and thrown away at some point. But the one thing that you're right about, it's not that I'm so much concerned that somebody who maybe 50 years after my death, whether or not they're going to find this thing and find value. The thing is, though, is I am writing with intentionality about if I'm journaling something today, my intention is that this is something that I'm planning to potentially come back to and share the detail of what my experience is right here, right now, in this moment with a client later or from the stage when I'm speaking later. I don't want to have a fuzzy recollection. I want to have a detailed account of what I'm experiencing, what I just learned, the thoughts that it's producing, the actions I'm taking. I want to be able to document this so that I can share this with others because I got to tell you what I just went through, that was painful. That I would never wish that on my worst enemy, blah, blah, blah. But I'm tell you what, this is meant to serve me. This, I'm going to grow through this response. I'm going to get up and I'm going to learn everything I can learn from this. And I am going to document everything so I can help other people avoid this experience. That's just on one of those kind of experiences.
that's really important because, first of all, you said something about fuzzy memory, and that's so important to recognize. Our memories are notoriously unreliable devices or systems. They're very fuzzy, they're very malleable, they can be changed later. They are changed.
They
Every
are
time
changed.
it's been demonstrated, every time you pull up a memory in your brain, you make an alteration to it when the file goes back in, just using a metaphor. It's not really a file. but it's a set of neuroassociations. And so it changes every time you access it. And if you doubt this, take some treasured memory from your childhood, of which there may be a video or film or photographic record, and then go back and look at it and compare it to your memory. It can be shocking how different it really is. So, and this brings me around to, I was reading David Allen some years ago, and he wrote about something he called distributed cognition, which for him was writing things down in a book. He's saying, I store my thoughts outside my brain. My brain's good for having ideas, not for storing and organizing ideas. And that's become a real thing for people. Tiago Forte wrote this course and now a book called Building a Second Brain. And it's all about managing your knowledge digitally because it's the most efficient way in some ways. There are other ways in which I think analog is more efficient. But for the specific purposes of running a business and being a coach and being a writer, I mean, I've talked to lots of writers in my community. We have thoughts. We want to preserve them and organize them in a way we can use them later and access them and make the most use of them. And that's the thing that inspired today's conversation, because you've been using a tool called Notion, and what you're doing with it really blows me away. Can you talk about how you ended up using Notion to organize your no? Well, how do you use it? Let's start there.
Well, let me go ahead and share with you my history of creating a second brain, is what you and some others have called it. I
Yeah.
never really thought of it as a second brain until that came up, and I'm like, I like that second brain. I've always called it my knowledge base. See, the thing is for me, how I got started with this, I've always been a journaler. But in the early days of my journaling, everything was in physical handwritten journals. And I still do physical handwritten journals today. But I sometimes try to create a process where I can digitize those as well and have it searchable. That's a whole nother story for another time. But I used to journal everything. It's like I want to journal all of my experiences. And it wasn't something I was sharing with anyone. But here's what began to happen when I started podcasting in December 2005, grew an audience in the tens of thousands and then hundreds of thousands. I was getting about 200 emails a week from people all over the world asking me questions related to a piece of content I just put out as a podcast episode. And they're like, hey, Cliff, how do you do this? You mentioned this. Can you tell me where you found this? And I was getting the same 20 questions from over 200 people. And so what I began to do is I began to create podcast content answering those questions. And then I would hit reply and I would say, here, listen to this. Here, listen to this. And then what would happen was people were listening to that episode that these people responded to immediately. I'd get an email like 9 months later from somebody who listened to that content that I published 9 months ago. And guess what? The same questions coming. And then I'm like, oh, I wish I could remember where I put that episode, because I used to link everybody to this. And I'd have to go search for my email archives and I'd have to remember a key phrase to find this. And it became a pain in the butt. I was creating so much content, but I couldn't find that content easily. It would take me 20 minutes to find the particular episode I did 9 months ago. And by that time, I could have just written the answer to him rather than send him a link. And I'm like, what if I created a searchable database? It's all keyword driven. And so I don't have to have everything digitized. I just know I have these information. So what I did is I started with what was it? A Google document. So a Google Word document or whatever. And I started writing keywords of every topic that comes up. And what I would do is under those keywords, I would put links. This podcast episode had this title and a link to that episode. This podcast had this topic, this topic, this topic, and keywords. So these keywords, every time I was creating a piece of content, I would be able to open this single document, and I would do a command F for find, so I can search the document, and I'm searching for a keyword, and then I'd find all the places where that keyword shows up, and I find within maybe 60 seconds specifically the one episode that I did 9 months ago. And I click through to it, confirm that was the episode. Yep, that's the one. And then I hit reply. Here's the link to your answer. It starts at 23 minutes and 22 seconds. So that's how I got started.
I remember receiving some of those replies. I would occasionally send you a message and say, hey, can you tell me what cable I need to use with my Rodecaster Pro to go on Clubhouse? And you would send me this little link to go listen to something or read something. And I always thought, man, I wish I was that organized. But what you just described sounds like a lot of work.
It is definitely a lot of work. But there's a reason why people pay me $1,250 for a single 90-minute one-on-one coaching session with me. Because when somebody hires me for one-on-one coaching, they're not hiring me for 90 minutes. What they are getting is access to every piece of education I've ever consumed, every experience I've ever had. They're getting access to every skill, talent, and ability that I have. And you could ask me anything related to all of those things, and in an instant, I can go and find a document that I created 17 years ago, or 13 years ago, or 3 months ago, or 4.5 hours ago. And you could ask me questions, and I could help you attain as much wisdom and knowledge that it took me. Let's just say within a single 90-minute call, I give you access to 5 documents that I've created over the last several years. In that 90-minute call, those 5 documents required about 7 or 10 weeks of my life to assemble and put together.
Yeah, it reminds me of that story of the engineer that was called into the Queen Mary because they couldn't get the engines going. And he came in and examined everything and tapped on a gauge with a hammer, and it all started up. And he left them a bill for, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but the ratio is correct. It's like 10,000 pounds. And he got an outraged note back from the naval office saying, we need an itemized bill. So he sent a new bill, and it said, tapping with hammer, 1 pound. Knowing where to tap, 9,999 pounds.
Yep.
That's the key.
That is the key.
That's the intentional use of your accumulated knowledge. So how did you get from a Google Doc to Notion? And let's talk about what Notion is and does and why somebody might consider using it. I especially recommend it for writers.
Absolutely. So I did go from Google Doc over to Evernote. As soon as the iPhone came out and I had this thing in my pocket, this is amazing. And of course, when the iPhone first came out, it didn't, Google Docs did not work well with the iPhone. We're talking about the original iPhone. And of course, this wasn't actually, maybe not the original iPhone. It might have been the second iPhone. But as soon as they opened the App Store, Evernote was one of the first apps ever created that was a database where you could store stuff. And so I was a subscriber to Evernote from the beginning. And then it's like, ooh, folders, subfolders. And I'm like, okay, so here's what I did is every piece of note, I would create a document, which is called, in Evernote, it was called a note. And I would put everything into that document. And then what I would do is I'd create a note called my table of contents. And it later became known as my knowledge base. And so that's what I call this, instead of a second brain, I call this my knowledge base. And so what I could do is, in that knowledge base had a table of contents, which had all the keywords, and all of those keywords linked to notes within Evernote. And that became the next thing. But then Notion came along, and I realized that, wow, I can do more beautiful formatting. I could embed video, I could embed audio, I could do it, and I could create columns. I'm not as restricted in the formatting of my text, my notes, the visual appeal of what I'm sharing. Evernote had so many limitations for me. And not to mention the fact, my biggest problem that I had with Evernote was that I had Evernote on my desktop, I had Evernote on my phone and on my iPad and on my laptop. And over the 15 years of using Evernote, I can't begin to tell you the number of times I would add a couple of new notes on my desktop or on my laptop. I would update the database, and then I would go in and I'm like, oh, this is great. I just saw this. And I'm updating I'm adding 3 more notes, updating my table of contents, only to learn 3 weeks later that there are now 5 different copies of my table of contents because of syncing errors. Who's got time to fix this?
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but a couple other challenges I have with Evernote is it kind of became my digital junk drawer. I just threw everything in it and didn't index everything. And then I'm I'm also challenged by the fact that the way they store the files, it's hard to get them out. A friend of mine referred to it as kind of like the Roach Motel.
Yeah. Once
Roaches
they
go
got
in,
you
but they
in,
don't come out.
yeah. And I felt that because the situation was when I wanted to move into Notion, they have an import feature, but there's some manual stuff that needs to be done afterwards if you really want to get to your raw content. So I moved to Notion. By the way, there are some benefits to Evernote that Notion doesn't offer, such as offline access. So that's a trade-off that I had to make. But let me tell you, having things not in sync between 4 or 5 different devices, that was a non-starter for me. It's like this has been a pain point that I've experienced for far too long in my life. So I'd rather have an occasional flight where I don't have access to this, which is even crazy because today I have access on the flight. And I was like, I'd rather be out in the woods hiking and not have access to this. But even that, it's getting to the point. So it, but Notion is all server based. So all of my content is on their server. If I don't have an internet connection, I don't have it. But other than that, everything is available. And not to mention the fact that I can go in right now to Notion and I can go in and do an incomplete export. I want everything, every page, every note, I want it all downloaded in markdown files or PDF files or some other, I think there's a third option maybe. And I also wanted to download all of the content, all of the videos and audio files and everything else. I want it all downloaded as a single zip file. And it will download thousands of documents, thousands of things, all in a single document. And I actually did this one day just to after I completed my transfer. I'd like to have at least a backup here. And I opened it up. It was many, 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 many gigabytes. And I opened up the folder, and inside the folder, it is so easy to see how organized it is. And you click on these, and it's got subfolders, it's got all of your content underneath it, all of the original files. It's beautiful.
So this is where most interviews would stop, but we're just getting started. Of course, what I want to do, I have a theory, and that is the best education is through demonstration. So I'm wondering if you would walk us through what you're doing with Notion and maybe describe some reasons why and how you're organizing. And would you share some of that?
I would love to do so. And so let me tell you one of my favorite uses of Notion and why I devote so much time, so much energy, so much effort into creating this knowledge base. And again, it has everything to do with the value that I bring to my clients, whether that's in a one-on-one coaching session, in a mastermind group, but I'm going to just talk today about one-on-one coaching. So here's what I created some notes about what I would share with you. Um, Oftentimes people come to me and say, Cliff, I just read the book, The Big Leap. I found a podcast episode you talked about this, and I just read it for the first time. I'd love to hire you as my coach to help me discover my zone of genius and then make the transition like you did. And like, awesome. Let's get into a session. And so I get into a call and they're like, I just have no idea what my zone of genius is. And I'm like, well, I can help you with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to I want to make sure that I'm able to share my sound as well for later usages. And so you see my screen now, Ray?
Affirmative.
All right. So you see that this is called my personal dashboard. And if I scroll down, this is my Notion. This is where I come to for the home of everything. And you'll see this is my knowledge base of resources. Well, this used to be called table of contents. Now, remember, I told you keywords, right? So if you just scroll through here, and by the way, there's probably some incredibly revealing things about who Cliff Ravenscraft is by some of these things. So I'm not hiding anything that I have notes on. So I'm sure a lot of people will have fun with stopping, pausing, screen capturing, and see what the heck kind of notes does this guy have.
The Cliff Ravenscraft expose.
Yeah, so you could see this thing just continues to scroll on. But
This is amazing.
but I don't have to do anything. All I have to do is hit Command. If I'm on the screen, I just hit Command F, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in Big Leap. All right. Or I could put zone of genius. And you saw how both times it takes me to takes me exactly where I want to go. So I can type in anything, but if I just type in Big Leap, there we go. Notes, Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, Zone of Genius / Upper Limit Problem, keyword rich titles. I click that and it takes me to this page right here. Now, if I'm in a coaching call with you, Ray, and you said, I want to know what my zone of genius is. Well, I'm just going to scroll right here and I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Hey, Ray, let me first ask you this. If outside influences like money or what your parents thought or family business and all this other stuff were not a problem, what would you really love doing? Okay, that's wonderful. Let me write that down. Hey, let me ask you this. What do you most love to do? Something that you could do for long stretches of time without getting bored. And then I would continue to ask these questions. By the end of you asking these questions, I have a lot of experience into formulating that into a single statement that would blow your mind about what your zone of genius is. And if you said, well, Gay said this, and what were those different he talked about the 4 common reasons why we have the upper limit challenge. Oh yeah, and I could find that easily because I have all of my notes about this. Everything that these are all my handwritten or typed up personal notes about everything I learned from the book, The Big Leap. I don't have to go pull the book off the shelf. I could instantly tell you what the 4 zones of work are, and I could describe to you in detail right here. And that's, by the way, that first scroll there, that was my recent note, but here's my notes on the second pass through the big loop, because why would anybody just take notes on this book once? So
Mhm.
here's the second time, and these are even more detailed. These are even better notes than the first time. So do you understand just how being in a coaching call and instantly at the top saying, you know what, I'm going to help you find your zone of genius. I'm going to ask you these questions.
Yeah, and here's the difference. I want to point this out. This is crucial for coaches, for writers, for consultants. What you've done is most people would just read a book and they would randomly have memories of things they saw in the book. So they might say, well, Gay Hendricks talks about zone of genius. You might talk to your client about that. But what you've done is you went through the book and wrote your own notes. I'm looking at them. I see they're complete notes on ideas. You rewrote the information, not just highlighted it out of the book, but wrote it down in your words, collecting the pieces of information you wanted so you could intentionally have access to this document later and call up the exact points and advantages and features and questions, things that somebody who just read a book and vaguely remembers it is not going to be able to do.
Yep. And here's the interesting thing, Ray, is that let's just say you were one of my clients. I also use Notion as a CRM. And so let's just say you're my client.
Customer relationship manager, for those of you who are wondering.
Yep. And so one of my clients, let's just say, is Tom Baker. You may or
Awesome.
may you may or may not have heard of Tom Baker, right?
Doctor
So
Who?
yeah, Doctor Who, exactly. So would I go in here if after I finish a coaching call with Tom Baker, so I actually do a couple of things. Matter of fact, these are all templates inside of Notion. So just to give people a reason why I love Notion even more is I create templates. And whenever I go through a first coaching session, I make sure that I've actually done each of these 5 things before I get started. Right after I finish a coaching call, I do an audio review such as this.
This is just a sample of an audio note that I would take right after a coaching call. I would spend about 30 seconds to as much as maybe 5 minutes to record a summary of what I felt immediately after the call so that I could listen to this recording right before my next call.
So just imagine the power of that. Ray, let's just say, hey, let's schedule a second complimentary coaching session. I want to give you, you know what? I think I'm going to give you an entire month to work on these actions that you said you're going to take. But I'd love to help you evaluate the results that you get. Let's schedule a call a month from now. Now, I do 8 90-minute one on one coaching sessions every week. And about 4 or 5 of those are with people who are not currently clients. So that's a lot of people I'm talking to every week. So 1 month later, it's time your name shows up for a second call and I have almost no recollection of what we talked about the last time. So all I have to do is click here and click play on that, and it reminds me, oh, I remember. Yeah, okay, this, yes. And not only that, I could click here and go straight to the transcript of that entire conversation. But I could also go here. By the way, I do handwritten notes, and I didn't do it for this, but in the future, I'll have it here. There would be a JPEG image of every page of handwritten notes from this meeting, and then the email follow up. All right. Tom, it was so wonderful to connect with you today. By the way, here is a Dropbox link for the recording of our entire conversation today. Our next scheduled call, by the way, these are all templates. I just type in the information or drag in and paste things here. Our next call is Tuesday, September 27th at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Here are the insights. We talked about your sonic screwdriver. You need to stop leaving it in the TARDIS. K9 does not perform well on rough terrain. That came out as an insight that you want to remember and recall. And by the way, don't blink around weeping angels. In fact, you said as a result of our insights, you're finally going to get around to fixing that chameleon circuit. So here are the actions you're going to take after our coaching call today. You're going to start a journal. This will be useful, especially in the future, I promise. And then you're going to honor Ramana's birthday gift that we talk about. All right. I look forward to evaluating the actions of these, or the results of these actions in our next call. But let's just say there's some additional resources. All right. The Big Leap book. You said you were going to read that. So check this out. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to look for that affiliate link. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab, actually, let me click here. So I'm just going to click here to this book and I'm going to re-grab the affiliate link, just so that you can see how I would do this if I were actually setting up a post follow-up call. So now I go over to Tom Baker here, and this is the Big Leap. And I'm going to hit add a link, hit paste, and hit link to that book. All right. Here, watch this video that I did after I read the book. All right. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my notes on the Big Leap, and I'm looking for that video that was the first one I ever did right after I read the Big Leap, because this has had the
Hey,
most
everybody, Cliff Ray.
this has had the most impact. So I like my clients to read or to listen or to do this. So watch this video, and I'm going to put link, and that's going to link to that video on YouTube. And of course, I also want to go back to my notes, and I want to say, how do you find your zone of genius? And I'm looking for the podcast episode I did with Ray Edwards. So let me just do a search for Ray Edwards. Let's see here. Okay, there it is. It pulled up there. Ray. All right, so here's featuring Ray Edwards, the last session ever. How to discover your genre. This is the one I wanted. I wanted this episode. So I'm going to click through here, and then I'm going to go back over here. Listen to this podcast episode on how to discover your zone of genius. And I'm going to do listen to this podcast episode is going to be a hyperlink. And then I'm going to hit paste, link to website. And one more thing, listen to this this podcast interview with Gay Hendricks, who is the author of the book. So let's go back over here, and interview with Gay Hendricks is right here. So I'll just click through to that, grab that URL, go back over here, and I'm going to put here, listen to this podcast interview. And we'll put that as a hyperlink, hit paste, link to page. Now, all of this is done. I'm just going to highlight all of this from the beginning of that email to over here. I'm going to go over here, and I'm just going to do Tom Baker, and let's see, Baker, and yeah, there we go. Tom Baker via Help Scout. That'll work. And then I'm going to type in coaching call follow up for date, and there we go. And then I'm just going to hit paste. Look how beautiful that formatted email is. Tom, it was so great. This is absolutely beautiful. All of these hyperlink right to the places and the resources, and I just hit send. Boom.
And Tom's not going to get an email like that from anybody else in the universe.
Yeah. So this is people say, Cliff, I wish I could actually have. And by the way, Tom would get this email in 10 minutes after our call. So think about that. Within 10 minutes of getting off the call with me, you will have all of the insights, you will have all of the additional resources, and you will have all of the action items. Your call will already be scheduled for the next one, and you have the date and time. All of this 10 minutes after you got off of a 90-minute call with me, which was one of the most powerful conversations you've had with anybody in your lifetime.
Now, I want all my copywriters who are taking part in this, watching this, or listening to it, think about what that means for you with your clients, with your writing clients, as you've gone through a 90-minute session with them, reviewing their marketing, reviewing their problems, their conversion troubles, whatever the case is that they're having a problem with. You've got recommendations, you're referencing pieces of copy, other campaigns. Imagine being able to pull something like this together within 10 minutes of your call and send it to them. I promise you, no other copywriter is doing that. Or if you're not a writer, if you're a freelancer, no other freelancer is providing this level of coaching and service and information and accountability. What Cliff's describing doesn't apply only to coaches, life coaches. It applies to everything we're doing online with our clients and also in our relationships with other people in general. This is an amazing way to be intentional about why you're collecting ideas and thoughts and reading books and listening to podcasts. And this is what I wanted to dig into, Cliff. This is beautiful. Thank you.
You are so welcome. I want to share with you something else. So sometimes I give assignments to my clients. So one of my favorite things was going to Tony Robbins and understanding values. So if I just do here, values, moving towards and moving away. So I click on this note right here, moving towards and moving away values, Tony Robbins from Date with Destiny. And there's a little note here. Date with Destiny is a 6-day immersive self-development seminar with ticket prices ranging from $5,000 to $12,000 US. I attended Date with Destiny virtual December 4th through December 9th, 2020, during the height of the pandemic, and paid $4,495 for this experience. I came away with countless insights and more pages of notes than you could possibly imagine. However, one session alone of Date with Destiny on moving towards and moving away's values was worth many times more than what I paid for the whole event. If you are seeing this page, I'm now sharing this incredibly powerful assignment with you, that could radically alter your experience of life moving forward. I hope that you will put as much time, effort, authenticity, and sincerity into the completion of this assignment as I did. Cliff Ravenscraft. And this is a step-by-step instructional guide on how to go through what Tony took 2.5 hours to demonstrate in Date with Destiny. I personally created this document. Here's everything you do. This is the description of what it all means. Here's the assignment. Here are the main focuses of the exercise. Follow each of these steps closely. Step 1, do this. Step 2, step 3, 4, 5, 6. Once you have done this, great news. You can rewrite your values now. Here's step 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. End of assignment. Now, the great news, Ray, is this. I can click this share button and I can turn this on so it's shareable via the web. So I can actually copy that and open this up and paste that link. And now this is available right here to anyone that I give this link to. You'll notice over here, my breadcrumb. By the way, this is the same note inside of Notion. You'll see that I have the breadcrumb that leads me back to my database. Whereas over here, there is no breadcrumb. They have access to this page and this page only, but this is a publicly shared link, but only I get to choose who I send this publicly shared link. So now I could send this. It's like, here's one of the actions. You said you would do this assignment. Here's the link to the assignment and all your instructions. Dude, this is incredible. I don't have to send them a PDF document. This is available right there. And by the way, this looks beautiful on the mobile phone when they click the link. It's all responsive. And I can change it if I found something. If I wanted to add a resource. Let's just say you were a coaching client of mine 6 months ago and you started doing this process, but you didn't finish it. But it's like, now I want to finish it. Well, that was 6 months ago that I gave you the document. What if I added like 5 more instructions, 5 more steps that are even more powerful? Well, when you log in to the link, you're getting the most up-to-date, most valuable version of this document. Come on.
Wow. Wow. I hope you're grasping, you copywriters, you freelancers, grasping the power of this, the potential and the level of service that you're rendering to your clients, Cliff, is off the charts. And it's not I mean, it takes effort, it takes work, but you're passionate about it. This is what you enjoy doing, learning and sharing what you've learned. But it's not as hard as it looks. Maybe I
It's
think at first people look at it and think, I could never do anything like that. Yes, you can.
Well, there is a learning curve to learning what Notion is, how it works. It is a page builder with pages inside of pages. And once you get your mind wrapped out around what Notion is, there is learning curve on how to use Notion. So I want to let you know, I did not wake up one morning and instantly know how to use Notion. There's probably about 5 to 10 hours of me watching tutorials on how to use Notion.
Thank you. That's important because I've picked Notion up 2 or 3 times, and each time threw it back down in disgust because I couldn't even figure out what the first step was.
Yep.
Because it's if you just log into a new Notion account, it's kind of daunting.
And
It's like a
it's
command line.
intimidating.
It's like,
I-
what do I do?
so you hear the fire and passion and the enthusiasm I have for Notion, right? A friend of mine tried to get me to check out Notion with this amount of enthusiasm 10 years ago or 5 years ago. 10 years ago is an exaggeration. 5 years ago. He was at my next level workshop. Cliff, why don't you create this in Notion? Why do you keep all this in Evernote? And I'm like, what's Notion? He goes, it's this. And he was all the stuff that I'm doing. It's like, and I went and downloaded, or I went and created an account on Notion. It's like, this is stupid. And so I could have had this 5 years ago, but instead I have it today. So I do want to share that. But once I figured it out, whoo, watch out. And so yeah, today all of this is super easy for me. But not only is it easy for me, uh, it, but it is effort. The effort I do not want to undersell on. The only reason this stuff is as thorough and is as deep and is as meaningful and useful as it is, I devote 3 hours a day into creating new content for this, usually 5 to 7 days a week. And I have done this for the last several years of my life.
Wow.
So I want people to hear that again. I invest about 3 hours a day, 5 to 7 days a week, the first 3 hours of my day from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., creating content for this thing.
But Cliff, I would have to give up 3 hours of scrolling TikTok to do that.
I know, but if you want to make $30,000 a month working 12 hours a week, this could help you get there.
And as a friend of mine once told me, you don't need easy, you just need worth it.
That's right. And by the way, when I say 12 hours of work, but Cliff, didn't you just say you did 3 hours a day, 7 days a week? Are you dude, this is fun. This is what I love. This is that 6 to 9 a.m. building this. This is I consider this my me time.
That's your zone of genius.
It's my zone of genius. I want to share with you a couple other things that are in here. Like if I wanted to create, if Ray, you said, hey Cliff, I got a conference coming up next month and I need you to, I want you to speak at my event and I need you to talk on this topic. And I'm like, oh, great. I'm going to go to my old score notes. All right. So let's see here, SCCORRE. And so it's right here at the top. It found it. And so I'm going to click here. Now, what I want to do is I don't need to go through all of my notes. I remember the SCORE speaker training conference, but I'm going to click here for 10 steps to building a talk. Boom. All right. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get a piece of paper and I'm going to write down who is my target audience. Well, Ray is solopreneur, freelance copywriters. Okay, great. That's my target. Is this a persuasive talk or an enabling talk? Well, Ray wanted me to enable people how they can become more effective by using Notion. All right, great. So this is an enabling talk. You can do this, and here's how. What is the objective? The objective is to convince them to do this and how to do it well. What keyword were I'm going to, and by the way, if you don't know the score, this will make no sense. But Ray, Does this blow your mind? Because you know the score method. You know how you choose a keyword for your rationale?
Yeah.
What if I told you, check out, I have a list in
Dang.
Toggle of all of the keywords that I could use. I could
That's astonishing.
I'm going to share with you 5 methods of using Notion. I can share with you the 5 needs that are met by using Notion. Here are the 4 objectives you could use with Notion. Here are the 5 paths you could go down with Notion. So those are, and this is all Toggle. Check that out,
Wow.
Toggle.
Wow.
What is my pregnant sentence? And this would make sense only for people there. So this is an enabling talk. Every freelance copywriter can uh, triple the amount of, or 10x the amount of value that they bring to their customers by using Notion or by following these 5 steps to creating a knowledge base in Notion.
Boom.
All right, that's going to be my talk. What's my rationale? And I'm going to just write down, here are the 5 benefits. All right. And, or actually the 5 features or the 5 steps or whatever. How will I open this? Here are my options for opening. I could do a startling statement. I could say something sarcastic. I could use a quote, a story. One thing I know I'm not going to do when I get up and Ray says, "Hey, Cliff, take it away." And I'm not going to say, "Thanks for being here. I thank you for this opportunity." No, I'm going to do something that's going to capture your attention because I know how to open and how I'm going to transition. How am I going to close this thing? Here are my options for closing this thing. I could close it with a personal story, a striking statement, a suggestive course of action. So I get to choose this. And now I'm going to practice and evaluate this talk so that I'm prepared. I could do this in probably 3 hours. If you gave me 3 hours notice on any topic because of the SCORE training from the SCORE speaker conference, I could outline a talk and knock it out of the park, blow people's mind with 3 hours of preparation or less.
What I love is this is an example of how you took a course, you took a training, you went to an event, a seminar, and you took the material and condensed it, wrote your own notes, but now you have them in this intentional system where you can easily pull them up and make use of them. That's extraordinarily powerful.
So I've been to this training 3 times. These are my notes here. Not only that, but I also have a link to the online training sessions. So I have all of the online videos of this. I have up here also the workbook. If I want to go and find the workbook, I could just click here. By the way, the workbook was made available to me in PDF. I went to a place called tinywow.com, a little extra bonus for people, and do PDF to JPEG. All right, so right here is PDF to JPEG. I can take that workbook, upload it, and it'll give me JPEG images. So check this out. This is a Notion document within that document, and this is all of the note. This is the actual workbook in JPEG images.
Very small files, and iOS can easily now parse out the actual text if you want to copy and paste.
Exactly. And so I have this stuff is just amazing.
Yeah.
And just one more, I'll share with you one more. I love creating lasting change, right? This is my
me
Tony.
too. Yeah.
This is my favorite program I've ever studied. Notes on Tony Robbins, Creating Lasting Change. Here's the link to where you can buy it on his thing. Now, by the way, this is private links to my audio files. So if I click here, it says this content is not to be shared publicly. These are for my own personal use only. This is not a publicly shared document, but these are the 10 days of creating lasting change in MP3 format that I can easily access anytime I want. And if I go back here, I want to show you, this is my notes on Tony Robbins is publicly shareable. But check this out. This is another thing I love about Notion. Notice this section right here, private links. All right. If I go over here and put in the shareable page, this page looks exactly like the other one, but there is no section for the page link to the private note, to the private audio files.
That's slick.
Notion knows that link, that page inside of that page is not accessible and shareable public, so it doesn't even show you that it was there.
Wow.
All right. So there's that, and of course, when just want to give people an idea of how I do things. Here's my overview of everything that you would get out of the 10-day course. But by the way, I hyperlink to multiple days. So like if I want to go straight to day 6 notes, I can click there. If I want to click here, I can go straight to day 1 notes. And the reason why I do that is because this document is rather large. All right. But I want to just give people an idea of how obsessive you could get with note taking. All right. So you get in here, and this is from the workbook. Here are some things. Here are some 6 historical philosophies from the human psyche that Tony Robbins pulls from. I can tell you that he pulls from Freud and Jung and Adler and Homey and Sullivan and Erickson. And so, I'm sorry, Eric Byrne. The humanistic approach, I could tell you all about the behavioral approach to psychotherapy, cognitive, semantic, energy psychology. And then from the audio program, here are my notes: the journey into the human psyche. And here's this illusion. Here's 9/11. Oh, it's like, oh, I made it. I remember when Tony Robbins talked about how different people responded to the 9/11 attack. Now, let's just say this came up in topic of conversation in a one-on-one coaching call. What if I just played this for you, Ray?
Or in 911, when I'm in front of the room and I've all of a sudden that morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, we're in Hawaii, and I get the phone call that the buildings have just been destroyed and more than 4,000 people, they thought at that time, had died. And out of that, in my room, we have more than 200 New Yorkers and more than 45 people that lost their entire company, all their friends, their family, their loved ones. And we got a group of people that are celebrating because they have a different belief structure, people thinking it's the end of the world, the end times have arrived, watching people fight, celebrate, cry, and I've got to make a difference right now.
See, just the power of being able to share that in a coaching call, on the spot, on demand.
Yeah, and not only that, it's what we've just experienced in this visit together is a multimedia experience. You've been free associating, going from one idea to the next, sharing your screen, sharing your notes. You had a thought about Tony Robbins, went to creating lasting change, pulled up a piece of media where we heard from Tony Robbins. These are all things that would take traditional media channels millions of dollars worth of equipment and staff and people to produce, and distribution channels. And I just was listening to a friend of mine, Ruslan KD, who's a Christian hip hop artist, and he has a Christian YouTube channel where he does some pretty controversial things. He takes on popular opinions and causes a ruckus. But he was reflecting on visiting a podcast studio. I don't want to call out the person, but a big podcast, well-known podcaster with millions of dollars worth of real estate and the beautiful glass enclosed offices and the staff, and his producer, Ruslan's producer, was saying, but you do all this, it's just you. And he's like, well, that's the technology, man. That's what's available to us. That's what you're demonstrating. And this is why I tell people, you are a media empire.
Yes.
You need to understand that. And these tools, Notion is inexpensive. It's a trivial expense to pay for a license for Notion. And what you can do with it is stunning.
Absolutely. I have one. Do you have time for one more case?
Absolutely, please.
So I'm going to share this with you. So if I go in here and share that same place, so I came up with one other thing. So I have 4,700 plus episodes of content, podcast form. I have thousands of YouTube videos, but I'm just going to search. I remember, gosh, there was a podcast episode where I talked about the power of dreaming. By the way, what would life be like if fill in the blank? The power of dreaming is one of the most powerful things. If you understood the power of dreaming, it would blow your mind. So all of a sudden, this just came up in a conversation, in a coaching call, right? Oh, what was that episode of, out of the 688 episodes of the Cliff Ravenscraft show that I've done, which episode did I, in the middle of it somewhere, talk about the power of dreaming? Because I know for a fact I did not title that episode The Power of Dreaming. The Power of Dreaming came up as a result of the actual topic. How on earth would I find what episode out of the 4,700 podcast episodes I've produced over the last 17 years of my life? How could I find which episode contained the power of dreaming? Let me show you. Now, by the way, if I go here and do power of dreaming, nothing. Okay, well, maybe let me just do dreaming. Nothing. Oh, crap. I guess maybe this is just useless. Something I'll have to come across later. No. I just go over here and do search, and I type in power of dreaming. Just give it a second. Oh, that was episode number 686 of the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. The Power of Dreaming. If I argue for my limitations, I will always get to keep them. By the way, here's the link to the episode.
Just like that.
And so check this out. It's like, wait a second, where's that power of dreaming? That power of dreaming is right here. The power, your subconscious mind will always find a way to answer the question. Here's the thing, the possibility. I wonder what life would be like if I were to make a full-time living from having encouraging conversations with others, coaching. That's a question I asked myself 15 or 16 years ago before I started my business. How would my life be different? How would I feel after working with each client? In what way would my coaching benefit the lives of those I coach? Here are the limitations that came to me. Here are some other possibility questions. And so this is just the power of dreaming, all within one episode. Because I outlined that episode before, why not create a page in Notion with all of the show notes in the outline for that episode so that it's instantly searchable at some point 20 years from now? All right.
Why
Now,
not indeed?
why not indeed? So I just want to, it's like, just imagine you have that for my thousands of videos, my thousands of podcast episodes. Now, I want to say for the record, do I have what I just showed you for all 2,000 YouTube videos and all 4,700 podcast episodes? No. But do I have one for every episode I have that I've published for the last 4.5 years? Yes.
Yes. And I'll be quick to add, it's pretty easy to get free, mostly accurate transcripts made of all your videos and podcasts. And then once you have those, it's pretty easy to upload that text to something like Notion for each episode. And then it takes work, but not as much as you might be afraid.
Yeah. And another service I like personally is otter.ai. And if you use otter.ai, I could take all of my MP3 files, which are on Dropbox folders, every episode, and you get an account. You can do a couple thousand hours a month. So you won't be able to do them. I wouldn't be able to do all of my content in a single month, but I could just upload all of these files into Otter. I don't have to currently bring them into Notion. So, but imagine if it would, for me, with 4,700 podcast episodes and a couple thousand YouTube videos, it would be about a 4-month project just to drag and drop and upload those into Otter and have all of it transcribed. All right. So, but that would be a worthy time. Matter of fact, let me put this on my to-do list. All right. So, but then all of that's just sitting in Otter. I don't feel compelled that I need to bring all of that into Notion right now. But here's what I can tell you that I would do if I'm in a coaching call. And I remember an episode that I did of Pursuing a Balanced Life, which had 640 episodes. And it was around 2007. I talked about this. I could go into Otter, do a search for a key phrase, find that particular podcast episode from 13 years ago or whatever that was uploaded from my archives. And then I'm like, hey, here's that. Now I know what episode it is and stuff like that. And because this came up in a coaching call today, I'm going to ask myself, would this come up again in the future? If so, that's when I'm going to now bring that particular episode and that transcript and create some notes and links and put that inside of Notion.
Wow. That's a mic dropper right there. Cliff, thank you for so generously sharing and demonstrating how you're using Notion to organize your knowledge base and demonstrating for those of us who are writers or coaches or consultants how we might do that intentionally to better our business and to better our relationships with other humans on the planet. How can people follow up if they want to hear more from you about what you're doing?
Sure. A couple of different ways. If you're a podcast listener, check out my podcast called The Cliff Ravenscraft Show. If you would like to get a behind the scenes look into all of the crazy things that I do every day of my life, all of the insights into the decisions that I make in my business, check out an audio program that I do called the Train with Cliff Audio Journal, where I give a week in review once a week. And sometimes I create some specialized content. It's all behind the scenes. It's available for as little as $10 a month at trainwithcliff.com. And certainly sign up for my email newsletter where I share a lot of stuff, including links to notes that I have in Notion, by the way. You can sign up for that email newsletter over at cliffravenscraft.com.
Highly recommend you do all. Cliff, my friend, I love you, and thank you very much for sharing.
I love you too, brother. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share something that means so much to me.